Yes, you read that right. In today's video, I'm going to be ranking every single location, scratch that, every single named location ever in Fortnite from Season 1, back in Chapter 1, all the way to right now in Chapter 2, Season 3. These rankings are based on nothing but my personal opinion, so I already know you guys are going to disagree, so go ahead and leave a comment. I don't care, you're going to disagree. And I would love to hear what you guys would change, so feel free to let me know in the comments. But without further ado, let's jump right into the video. So coming in at dead last, we have Moisty Palms. Moisty Palms was the worst location, in my opinion, in the history of Fortnite. It was so annoying to play at. Every time you crouched, you turned into a prop. It just made fights extremely difficult. It just wasn't a good spot. Coming in next to last is Flush Factory. You guys may disagree with me, but Flush Factory was just not good. It was so far away. It didn't have a lot of loot. No one else ever landed there. You only landed there for challenges, and that was it. Next on my list would be Polar Peak. Polar Peak, there was a good amount of loot there, but there was just not a lot of mats. Like, there was a few trees, you could farm the big castle, and that was about it. Also, what I really hated about Polar Peak was how hard it was to get up and down it. Especially in competitive games, there's this clip of Tim playing the World Cup qualifiers, and he, of course, dies to fall damage, falling off Polar Peak. It was just really hard to get down from Polar Peak. So yeah, next on my list is the block. Now, this one kind of depends on which block it was, but I'm just going to put it pretty far down here because it changed every week. So you had to learn the block every single week, and they never were that great. They were really cool to look at, but it was always so hard to loot. But occasionally they had those mythic chests there, or super chests with that guaranteed gold guns. That was pretty cool, but I never really liked the block. And up next on my list is another old location, and that is Haunted Hills. Haunted Hills, I don't know, it just wasn't that good. It was far away, wasn't a lot of loot. It wasn't even like a very artistic location. It was just there. It was just a few buildings, a few small buildings, a few chests. Just not a lot of loot, not a lot of mats. You never got in off spawn fights unless there was a challenge there. Yeah, I just didn't really like Haunted Hills. Wasn't that good. And next to my list would be the Lonely Lodge. Lonely Lodge, I don't know, kind of got mixed opinions. The tower was cool, had those chests up top, an OG location, but I don't know, only wood there, just not a lot. You had mushrooms, so you got some shield, but just not that good. Next on my list would be Tomato Temple. Tomato Temple, just like an off-brand Tomato Town. It just wasn't as good as Tomato Town in my opinion. I didn't like it as much. Not a lot of loot. It was kind of awkward to fight in that big hole right by the house. I just didn't like Tomato Temple. And next on my list would be Mega Mall. Mega Mall sucked. Those wind turbines at Mega Mall made it so difficult to fight. And after you did fight, you'd have no time to heal because someone would just be flying right on you trying to get in your box. I didn't like the Neo vibe to begin with. And Mega Mall, I don't know. It just wasn't retail. And we want retail. We don't want Mega Mall. Up next is Salty Springs. A long time location. Always been in the map. But there's just never enough loot. I never get shield there. There's always a bunch of people that land there. And you kill them all and you come out with nothing. I always seem like you get no loot there. That's why I'm putting it so far down on my list. But next on my list would be Weeping Woods. A Chapter 2 location. It's alright. Just a ton of wood. Nothing else. Just a few cars, a few rocks. But it's just a pretty bland location in my opinion. Not a huge fan. Next on my list is the Holly Hedges. Another Chapter 2 location. It's just, these Chapter 2 locations just didn't do it for me. Holly Hedges, it's got great loot. It's just no one else really lands there, and just not a huge fan of Holly Hedges to be honest with you. Next on my list is Leaky Lake. I'll tell you, it was so annoying to fight in that like no gravity zone with the rift in the middle. You would try and jump and you just get beamed because you couldn't connect to anything to build. It was just annoying. There was not a lot of loot there. It was just annoying to fight at. Any lake location, honestly, was just annoying because there was so much space in between you that it was just nothing. It's just no man's land. It was just not fun to fight at. Next on my list is Starry Suburbs. A pretty small location, and I did not like the idea of the stars. I don't know. It was an alright location, I guess. I just didn't like the stars. You had to go around and search for stars to get loot. It was just weird. Next on my list is Coral Castle, a new location. I've only landed there a few times, but there's just only brick. It's only brick. That's all you get. Good amount of loot, and you're also on the natural low ground to anybody third partying. Like, you got to build up out of it, kind of like Dusty Divot. Just an awkward location to fight at. and just only brick. That's it. Brick and chests. So yeah. So up next on my list is Tilted Town. I hated Tilted Town. I don't know. I've always been a decent builder, and when you can't build, what's the point? Fortnite is a building game, and you just took building away in Tilted Town. It just wasn't fun. Unless you were like Nick Merckx and you're really good at setting up right-hand peaks. I don't know. Tilted Town just wasn't it for me. So yeah, next on my list is Loot Lake. OG location. Just that one house in the middle, one house on the side, and those two factories. It was just so spread out. Like, it was all right for solos, but if you're in duos or squads, there wasn't enough concentrated loot. Like, it was just so spread out. It just wasn't it for me. And up next is a fairly old location, and that is Junction. Quite a lot of metal here, a few chests, but it was always really far from zone. There was nothing else out there. It was Junction, and that was it. And when you had to rotate the zone, you had to go around that huge mountain, which was kind of annoying. So yeah, just not a whole lot to Junction. Following Junction, I have Moisty Meyer. Bunch of huge trees. That's about it. There was that one giant tree that had 3 chests around it. A little shack in the middle. The original Moisty Meyer wasn't that good, but then they added the movie set, which had a few more chests and pallets. Again, usually really far from zone, so just not a great location. Up next, I have the pressure plant. After the volcano event, we got that giant factory looking thing in the volcano, and it had that big wind turbine in the middle, which was great for rotations, but in a competitive game when the zone ended there, it was a mess. So yeah, pretty average spot in my opinion. And up next is a mythic PY from last season, and that is the Grotto. The Grotto was the first location of its kind, being like all underground. The loot there was crazy good. Brutus's minigun was so strong, the vault was loaded, but there were loads of henchmen there. And even the wind tunnel in the middle, it didn't get you very far when you tried to rotate with it. So yeah, it was a great spot if you could win it, but it was almost always heavily contested. And up next, I have Lazy Lake. Lazy Lake is the wannabe Tilted of Chapter 2. A bunch of giant buildings in the center of the map, but it's just not the Tilted that we all fell in love with. There's plenty of loot, plenty of mats, but it's just not Tilted. Next on my list is an OG location, was not originally named, but eventually got its name, and that is Tomato Town. This is the first place I landed at in Fortnite ever, and I remember that. Tomato Town, it's got a few chests. It wasn't that good for loot, but it's got a special place in my heart, you know, being the first place that I ever landed at. If you count those houses outside of it, it was a pretty good spot, but Tomato Town itself, not that good for loot. Just a pretty nostalgic location. Next on my list is Lucky Landing. When I think of Lucky Landing, I think of World Cup champion Booga. This is where he landed for the World Cup, and they even put a trophy on that tree in the middle that has Booga's name on it for a little while, so that was pretty cool. A pretty good location, but it was just so far, and if there were no rifts at that truck by the desert, then you just had to run a long way of zone pooled north. Yeah, just good loot, but just a little far for me. Next on my list is another new mythic POI location, and that is the Fortilla. Fortilla is an interesting location. It might be the largest location ever in the history of Fortnite. Not by a density of chests, but just space. The Fortilla is huge. You could split the Fortilla up into 4 sides and get enough loot for 4 different trios. It's just a lot of loot there, but it's just so spread out. And I'm not a huge fan of the water all around it. I hate fighting in the water. It just makes fights so awkward. That's why I'm putting it so far down on my list, but good loot. After the Fortilla, I have Rickety Rig. A pretty good spot in Chapter 2. You get that guaranteed supply drop there, which was huge because you got a free launch pad. But it's in the water again. I just don't like places that are in the water. So that's why I put it so low on my list. But up next on my list is Frosty Flights. Frosty Flights. We know Frosty Flights from Tfue landing there. He used to land there all the time. Get those ballers, get the planes, and do some fun tricks with them. It was a good spot. There was not a lot of mats at Frosty Flights, but there was a good amount of loot, and it wasn't usually contested a lot, so it was pretty decent. So yeah, next on my list is another water location. That is the Yacht. The Yacht, it's interesting. The loot last season with the suppressed weapons, I mean, not a lot of people landed there, so you could get some good loot, but it was suppressed weapons, so it wasn't that good. When Deadpool came on it, the pistols were terrible, but people didn't usually land there, so you got decent loot. You got a guaranteed launch pad. That's why I like it a little bit. Next on my list is another water location, and that is the Rig. The Rig was just... Boom bow was great. I will give it to that. The boom bow was a good weapon, but it was hard to get. TNTino was hard to find, and then you had to build up to loot any of the rig itself. It was just so far off the water. You only got metal there. The rig was also really far from zone usually. That got kind of annoying. So that's why I'm putting it so far down on my list. But that brings me to my next location, which is an OG location. And that is Wailing Woods. The original Wailing Woods was not good at all. There was what? 3 chests there, a load of trees. You're lying if you never got in a game with your friend and tried to 1v1 at Wailing Woods. But yeah, then it got updated and you got that bunker underneath that had a bunch of more chests and some metal for you to farm, which also had those teleporting portals that I'll put a clip up here of Tom 72 hours going through one of them in a scrim and just getting demolished and flipping out on his teammates. That was pretty funny. One of my favorite moments of Wailing Woods is watching Tom get destroyed. But yeah, just a pretty nostalgic location. I like it. Another super nostalgic location is my next spot, and that is Dusty Depot. Dusty Depot is probably the besides Tilted, might be the most known location in Fortnite. It's just Dusty Depot. Like, what else do I gotta say? Not a lot of loot, but everyone's been there. On to my next location, Sweaty Sands. Sweaty Sands. What do I gotta say? It's just like a wannabe mini Tilted on the beach. A hotel, bunch of houses, but it's just not it. Like, lot of loot. You could split it up into 2 squads even, but it's all right. I know Mongrel landed there for FNCS. Lots of fishing there. It was next to that huge whirlpool. It's a decent spot. I like Sweaty Sands. Next on my list is Neo Tilted. It's tilted, but it's not good as OG Tilted. It's got those wind turbines that you can fly around in. Got the Neo vibe, which I wasn't a huge fan of, but hey, it was tilted. A lot of people landed there and you could get a lot of kills super fast, and that made it really fun. Next on my list is another OG location, and that is Greasy Grove. Greasy Grove. The original Greasy Grove, great. The Taco Time, wait, before we get to Taco Time, I think we had Ice first. The iced Greasy Grove, terrible. A few chests, and there was that one in the ice box that you just could never get, but you could always hear it. Super annoying. But the worst Greasy Grove of all is Taco Time. Taco Time, super annoying. You get a guy to 1 HP and you'd be dancing with tacos in your hands. Just really dumb in my opinion, Epic Games. But next on my list is Anarchy Acres. I loved Anarchy, honestly. But it was just like the Walmart version of Fatal. Like, it was a good farm, but just not as good as Fatal. And not as good as Frenzy. It's just a very average farm. I landed here a lot of times, honestly. But just never got a lot of loot. And then the next location is also another farm, which is Frenzy Farm. I had to put Frenzy Farm above Anarchy because Frenzy's got way more loot. If you've watched competitive Fortnite, you've heard of Defend the Farm, Arab versus Chap. Just a pretty notable location in Chapter 2. Got good loot. I like Frenzy Farm. Next on my list is Lazy Lagoon. This is where Ninja and Reverse 2K landed for World Cup qualifiers. I loved the scenery and vibe of Lazy Lagoon. I love the ship, love the cannons. It was just like a very eye-pleasing location with good loot. Got guaranteed metal from those anchors. You could rotate with the cannons. Just a good location all around, in my opinion. Next on my list is Dusty Divot. Dusty Divot. So originally when Dusty Divot came out, you got those hop rocks that you could grab and you could float around and you could impulse and go miles, which was really fun. I remember the first time landing there when the season came out. I'm not kidding you, 80 people landed there and it was just so fun. But then the trees grew back and it was still good, but it was just hard to fight out of. Like, once you got stuck in there, you just could not get out, in my opinion. It's just kind of rough, but it was a decent location. Next on my list is Risky Reels, a location that has been in both chapters now. The original Risky Reels, we all remember that challenge where you had to open 7 chests there, because that was the first time they had that skin that you could get in the middle of the season, and everyone wanted it so bad at the same time. So we would all land there that first day that challenge came out, and there would just be 100 people there. It was super annoying. It took me hours to get that challenge done, but hey, it was fun doing it. The Chapter 2 Risky Reels, same kind of vibe, just not the same feel as Chapter 1, you know? Chapter 1 was just way better. We all know. We all agree. Next on my list is Dirty Docks. Dirty Docks. Great location, got good loot, but it's just a little far. And it's kind of hard to rotate out of. Plenty of mats there, plenty of loot, plenty of shield. Just a little far sometimes. That's all I got to say about Dirty Docks. Next on my list is Caddy Corner, a Chapter 2 icon. Probably the most overpowered weapon ever in Chapter 2. The Caddy Launcher can be found at Caddy Corner. And ever since the season came out, everyone has been landing there all the time. It's basically the tilted of chapter 2. It's a good spot. Got good loot. Got plenty of fruit there, plenty of shield, got the vault. But the henchmen here, I feel like there's more henchmen in Caddy Corner than any other mythic POI ever. I feel like I'm just always getting shot up by henchmen. It's just super annoying, but got good loot, so it makes it worth it. Next on my list is another version of Tilted, and that is Gotham City. I only landed here a few times, to be honest, but it was pretty fun. That grappler that you could get out of Gotham City was pretty cool. It was fun to play around with, fun to move around the map. And you could also get those bat bomb things that you could pick up. It was a fun location to play around with. Next on my list is Misty Meadows. I feel like it's a really underrated location. Got a lot of loot there. Good mats, plenty of fishing locations around there. It's just a great all-around location in chapter 2. Next on my list is Snobby Shores. A fairly OG location. Snobby Shores, a lot of loot there. You usually get about 1 or 2 teams landing there maybe, but it was just far from zone usually, which got annoying. But then the quad crashers came out and we watched Tifu. He just had to fly quad crashers. So when we learned that, Snobby Shores became a pretty viable location. You could also go up the mountain to that Viking ship and hit rifts up there, which made it pretty useful. But yeah, Snobby Shores, pretty decent. Next on my list is the Authority and the Agency. I'm going to start with the Authority because the Agency had that drum gun that was super overpowered. Way better than the drum gun at the Authority. So I'm putting Authority below Agency. Both kind of the same idea. Big location, center map. A lot of people landing there, a lot of action. Good loot, but hard to get. It was hard. It's hard to win at the Authority and Agency, I'm not going to lie. Too many people. The drum gun's overpowered, but the grappler was so fun to use this season. The grappler this season had so much range. You could move around the map so fast with this new grappler. But I got to give it to the Agency. The drum gun at the Agency was just so much better than the drum gun now. It's just so overpowered last season. So yeah, the Authority and the Agency. Agency better than the Authority. So next on my list is Happy Hamlet. Happy Hamlet. Probably one of the best locations that was in that snow biome when it came out. It was great. Had a lot of loot. A little far, but it had those ballers on the racetrack next to it, which made it pretty useful to rotate out of. Usually got contested quite a bit. I remember watching Mr. Savage and Benji Fishy land their World Cup all the time. Super fun to watch. I just like the vibe of Happy Hamlet. I like the style of the buildings there. It's a cool location. Next on my list is Steamy Stacks. One of the best locations in chapter 2. Got great loot. You got those stacks out of there that you can easily fly to zone with. You always get an off-spawn fights at Steamy Stacks. Good action, good materials, good loot. Just overall a great location. Next on my list is the best new chapter 2 location in my opinion, and that is Craggy Cliffs. Craggy Cliffs is just a great spot. You got slurp barrels there, you got a lot of loot, you got fishing, you got everything. It's good action. You got boats there to rotate out of. It's just a good all-around spot. And next on my list is my favorite farm, and that was Fatal Fields. Oh, do I miss Fatal Fields. I used to land there all the time. Just a super nostalgic spot. Good loot, good mats, center zone usually. Always got an off-spawn fight, always won the off-spawn fight. So yeah, I just love Fatal Fields. Next on my list is a chapter 1 and chapter 2 location, and that's Pleasant Park. Pleasant Park is a staple of Fortnite. Everyone's been to Pleasant Park. Everyone was there to watch the Marshmallow concert there. Just a great time at Pleasant Park. Always the same. Everyone knows the chest layout there. Yeah, I just love Pleasant Park. Before we get into my top 5, I just want to shout out everybody using my creator code Milano. If you want a shout out in my next video, send me a picture of using my code to my Twitter or Instagram. They'll both be linked in the description, and I will add you to the list for the next video. Also, don't forget to leave a like if you enjoyed this video so far. But yeah, let's get into our top 5. And next is Tim the Tapman's home and native, and that is Retail Row. Another location, chapter 1 and chapter 2, a staple of Fortnite. Everyone knows Retail Row. You gotta love it. At number 4 was a unique location, and that is Lazy Links. You guys may hate me for this, but Lazy Links was just, I don't know, it was just a cool location. I love the vibe of the clubhouse, the tennis courts, the golf carts. It was just a fun place to land at, a fun place to fight at. Yeah, I just miss Lazy Links a lot. And at number 3 on my list is Shifty Shafts. Shifty Shafts was a great spot. It was center zone, got good loot, got good off spawn fights. You had 2 houses off there to the side, And after you won Shifty Shafts, you could go right into Tilted and try and third party, get a few more kills. It was just a great spot if you were going for a decent kill game, you know? I just love Shifty Shafts. And at number 2 on my list is Paradise Palms. Paradise Palms is like the desert Tilted. Always gotten off spawn fights there. Plenty of people landed there. Good loot. You had rifts there to rotate out when you got done fighting. It was pretty far. You know, it's on the edge of the map. But since you had rifts, it was a great spot. You could take your time on the off spawn fights. You didn't have to rush it. Plenty of loot. Yeah, it was just... I love the desert vibe over there too. Paradise was just a great spot. And at number 1 on my list is none other than the original Tilted Towers. If your number 1 is not Tilted Towers, then what are you doing? Tilted Towers is the best location ever in Fortnite. There's just no question. There was so much loot there. If you're going for a 20 bomb, you were going Tilted. You could get 10 kills in Tilted in 30 seconds. It wasn't uncommon. Everyone was one shot. It was just chaos there all the time. So much fun, so much action, so much loot. It was just the peak of Fortnite was original Tilted Towers. Now, like I said, these were all the named locations, but there are a few honorable mentions that I want to include from unnamed POIs that I really enjoyed. And those are... So yeah, these honorable mentions are the Westworld location, or Pueblos, whatever you want to call them. Just a good spot. I landed here all the time, to be honest. Pueblos, 10 out of 10. The factories, both factories. The center factories by Dusty and the factories in the snow biome. Both were great spots. I love the factories. Also, the Viking Ship. The Viking Ship was a great spot for duos, at least. You couldn't go any more than duos. Had good loot. You had rifts up there as well. Good to rotate out of. Yeah, Viking was great. And also Camp Cod. New location. Great spot. Great spot. Tons of loot. Just love Camp Cod. And the last honorable mention I want to give is to the Racetrack by Paradise. Great loot there, honestly. You got rifts over there too. There's a bunch of metal you could farm there. Just a decent spot. So yeah, don't forget to leave a thumbs up, subscribe if you're new. But until then, I will see you all in the next season. Peace.